we won't record the nonsense. Look, in full disclosure, we're being recorded. Jeff, is that okay with you?
Well, I thought you weren't going to record the nonsense.
Oh boy, you're funnier than your dad. And I thought he was funny. Okay, Paul would be very disappointed if I didn't tell the board members and the committee chairs that we're going to postpone the board meeting to the third Tuesday. That's the 20th. And we're doing that because Paul's going to be out of town and we can't have a board meeting without Tom. Someone mentioned, will I talk about RLI? Well, yes, I will. We're right down to the wire. It's this Saturday. I'm sure you can get in if you act now, but I would encourage you to act right away. Who had the question about RLI?
Bill, I had the comment. I tried to register. When I went in, it said there were 18 total slots, 15 had been filled, so that left 3 slots still available. But it would not let me register. It said that all registrations are closed down.
I've got an inside track on that. Let's get offline, Chuck, and get you in.
All right.
Well, some of the other ones were dropped.
What's that?
I was dropped because they have overcapacity, and I registered weeks ago.
Let me make a phone call and see what we can do. I know Rudy pretty good. Rudy owes me a favor.
Don't get me back into this session because I've already made travel plans since they dropped me.
Okay, well, we'll get Chuck in. The Exmoor Rotary Club is not having their oyster roast, but they are going to try to make up a bid by selling barbecue. $10 a pint. They'll be sending us more information. You can buy a ticket to buy. Yes. Did somebody have a question? If you don't buy a ticket in advance, you can go to the Exmoor Town Park on the 24th and buy some barbecue. So let's support Exmoor. They've been very kind to us when we have our events and fundraisers. Get your flu shot. No more on that. If you don't have your flu shot, shame on you. Once again, Terry Flynn needs 2 parking volunteers, but I think we have them. Paul, you're going to help him park, right? And
right, Jim Rich.
I'm pretty sure Jim Rich said yes. But Diane, if you want to get in on that, you can help park as well.
Yes.
You can't have too many parkers.
Right.
Moving quickly, if I'm going too fast, just say slow down, Bill.
Do you know where they will be parking?
Yeah, the parkers know where they'll be parking. Diane does know, but Diane and I have had
Yes.
the problem with having Jackie in the same room is mute doesn't work. She just talks over the my screen here. So Jackie, please.
All right. Hey, Bill.
Yes. Oh, there. I love you too, darling. Where was? Oh, okay. October 24th. What is October 24th?
Exmoor barbecue.
What else?
World Polio Day.
That was a test. You passed, Robert.
World Polio Day.
Very good. It's World Polio Day, and I've been racking my brain about what we would do to really celebrate that Saturday. But since we're not meeting that day, I'm going to declare Happy Dollars on the 13th and the 20th. That's next Tuesday and the following Tuesday. All Happy Dollars will go to Polio Plus. That's a decree. If you want to argue with me about it, let's do it offline. But I think that's the right thing to do. But if you can come up with a better idea, of course, we're receptive to that. But right now, we'll make the next 2 Tuesdays Happy dollars will be Polio Plus. We're gonna skip the fact that we need a president-elect, you know that. And, but we're moving along. I got a text this morning from Mary Yu. Mary has passed.
Yep.
She's welcomed as a citizen. And the next step is she has to go to a ceremony. So when we get that date, we'll jump in cars and buses and we'll go over to Norfolk and welcome Mary to the United States of America. I'm really tickled. I've never known anybody who's become a citizen. So I'm looking forward to that. Call your buddies. And enough of me yelling at everybody today. I'm just going to be a nice guy because I'm really looking forward to our guest speaker joining us. Jeff, don't feel obliged to fill the whole time, but I wanted you to have all the time you needed to talk with us. I'm sure we have another number of questions, but Randy, will you do the honors?
Before you do that, I'd like to interject one little statement, please.
Yes, Stanley.
October 21st, 6:30, membership party. We're having a meeting on Zoom. Let me know if you'd like to attend. It's once a month, and this is our monthly membership party. We get some ideas on how getting new members and what we can do and some fun things that we can do. There's always good information there. So again, that's October 21st. It's at 6:30, and it's on a Zoom. Let me know if you'd like to attend.
Have you formed your committee, or are you inviting people to become committee members?
I'm inviting everyone to become committee members. I am still waiting for some more committee members. It's a real easy task because I'm the only one, and everything I say goes.
Yeah, it sounds like your committee is like John Burtis's committee. For those of you that don't know, John Burtis has an ad hoc committee to find a new president. And so far, he hasn't done squat. But we won't blame him. Hey, John, put yourself on the screen there so people know who you are. So we've got two committees, but everything starts with a committee. And I'm looking forward to a really ongoing membership program. And Stanley, I think we've got a member in the reach for you already. So
great.
Yeah.
Great. Beautiful.
So,
love it.
Okay, so thank you for that, Stanley. That was worth the interruption. Randy.
Yes.
Are we having no happy dollars today?
What's that, Paul?
You want to do happy
dollars? No happy dollars?
Do happy
yeah,
dollars.
that's right.
Asking.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Thanks, Paul. Jeff, we will get you on. This has been the kind of a screwy day. Okay, Diane? Is it up, Jack?
No.
Diane? I tell you, this is the most screwed up meeting we've ever had. Diane? Okay.
We don't need the screen.
We don't need, obviously we don't need the screen. Okay, who's going to be the first to have a happy dollar?
I've got 5 happy dollars. I'm just happy that Jeff is with us and able to join us. And geez, a whiz. Dave, you're going to cost me another $5. So I have another 5 happy dollars because Dave Kelly was able to join us.
I've got 5 happy dollars because today is my oldest son's birthday. And he is 46. So I haven't talked to him yet, but I'm sure he's doing all right. Are there any other happy dollars?
He's a
Alan's
he's
got a
state
happy
trooper, right?
dollar.
He's a state trooper, right?
Good, Alan.
Alan, you're on mute.
Was that $1,000 you said, Alan?
That's what I heard.
Okay,
I heard-
I'm online now.
I heard that.
This past weekend, we went to my granddaughter's wedding out in Maidens, Virginia. Had a wonderful time. It was an outdoor wedding, and so everything was easily social distanced. But it was a grand time. And while there, I was told that we are now expecting our 12th great grandchild. So
Wow.
there you have it.
How much was it, Alan?
What's that?
How many happy dollars? Alan, don't play dumb. How many happy dollars?
Yeah, I said it could be $5 happy dollars. Oh, that was while I was on mute. Oh, it's fine. Right. There we go. Yeah,
Just teasing you, Alan. You know I'm.
I know. Yeah.
You know, I have 5. My youngest grandson will be 4 tomorrow. And I just got word today that the Supreme Court case I'm involved in that was going to be in November, then it was going to be in January, it's not going to be in March. Which means I probably won't have to live long enough to worry about it. That'll be somebody else's problem.
Hey, John, is that Virginia or United States Supreme
No,
Court?
Virginia. And I won't be doing the argument. Just in case, I'm a lead attorney, but not the one that's going to argue it. So anyway,
Okay, that's great.
I hope to be alive in March of 2021 when that comes, if it ever gets on the docket again.
John, you will be alive.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, I can appreciate your saving your happy dollars for Polio Plus next week. So if there are no more, Randy, you're on.
Okay. Jeff, I've known him for his entire life. And he's married to his wife, Kelly, has 2 great sons. And that's all the personal information. Jeff is a senior investigator with the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke. And that's one of the many institutes within NIH. His background, graduated from Duke University, did his PhD at University of California, San Francisco, did postgrad work at Bellum Institute, and in 1999, I think, joined NIH. I think he's going to talk to you today in broad general terms about NIH rather than what he focuses on. So I'm just going to give you a brief summary, and it's going to really be brief. He focuses on the eye, its sensory capabilities, how they're developed, and then how that information is transmitted to the brain and what the brain does with it. I got my PhD in oversimplification, so that pretty much covers that. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to my son. It's all yours, Jeff.
Thanks, Dad. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you for the invitation. And thanks, Dad, for the introduction. My goal here is to not bore you to tears. So
Okay.
please interrupt and ask questions whenever something's not clear. I thought that you would be most interested to understand, and based on Bill's input, how the NIH works in very general terms. And then I'm going to spend one slide on what I do at NIH, and not spend much time of that at all on that. And then finish with a few slides explaining how NIH and its partners have undertaken the large task of controlling the coronavirus. Okay, so that'll be at the end. Okay. Okay, can you guys see my laser pointer here?
Yep.
Yep.
It's green for you colorblind guys, if anybody's on there.
Yeah.
Yeah, as a vision researcher, that's a big deal. Okay, so as you guys probably know, the NIH is one of the numerous agencies contained within the Department of Health and Human Services. So it receives all of its appropriations through Congress and is administered through HHS. And the NIH's mission is I like the way this is worded, to seek fundamental knowledge about the nature and behavior of living systems and the application of that knowledge to enhance health, lengthen life, and reduce illness and disability. And the mission encases this, essential transformation between what we call basic science, and that is, the scientific investigation of biological systems to understand how they work, how healthy systems work, because you need the basic understanding about how healthy cells and organs and systems work before you can understand how they're influenced in disease. Okay, and the second word that I've highlighted here is the application, and that's tricky. The translation of this basic science to a clinical application. So turning what we're learning as we say, at the bench in the laboratory to applying it to help patients in the clinic and in hospitals. Okay, and this is outlined in a series of goals, and I should say that some of these slides that I'm showing you, I actually got directly from the NIH director's office. So these are similar in content to things that Francis Collins presents when he talks about the NIH. There are four stated goals, and one has to do with facilitating and supporting the science itself. Okay, to foster fundamental creative discoveries, and that's talking about the basic science, and innovative research strategies, so that we can direct our efforts in the most fruitful directions. And then again, this application of this knowledge, this translation of the basic scientific information into clinically useful therapies and methodologies. The second goal has to do with infrastructure, maintaining and renewing resources to ensure our nation's capability to prevent disease. And notice that there are two kinds of resources. There's physical resources, infrastructures like hospitals and the ability to produce drugs and reagents, but also very importantly, the human resources. So this has to do a lot with training and the efforts to train new generations of scientists and clinicians. The third has to do with communication. So to expand the knowledge base throughout the country, both among scientists, but also among the public. Okay, and to incorporate that knowledge into other features of our economy and our society, to enhance the well-being of the country, both economic and otherwise, and to ensure continued high return on the public investment. This I'll return to in a minute, but it's important for the NIH, particularly these days, to make a compelling argument that the money invested in the NIH's activities is well spent. And so I'm going to return to that in a minute. And finally, to do all of this according to a very high degree of ethical standards, both scientific ethics and integrity, as well as ethically relating the discoveries to the public, and also anticipating and paying attention to the implications of different scientific discoveries on the society at large. Okay. So NIH's history, things really got going in the middle of the 20th century, but actually it dates back to 1887 in the Laboratory of Hygiene, which was first established on Staten Island. And in 1887, it became a lab, a federally supported lab of the United States Public Health Service. And in 1891, it was moved from Staten Island to the Washington, D.C. area. And in 1930, an act of Congress transformed this lab into the National Institute of Health. It was the first institute, and it was joined in 1937 by the National Cancer Institute. Okay, and then in 1940, President Roosevelt, who's shown here on the steps of what we call Building 1, because it was the first building, dedicating the buildings and the grounds of the campus. And then in 44, he created a federal funding law for the NIH. So it is a line item in the national budget, and Congress approves its budget every year. Now, around this time, NIH was a rather bucolic, small campus. You can see right here, this is Building 1, where Roosevelt stood when he dedicated the grounds. Things have expanded a bit over the years, and NIH is now a much larger campus. For comparison, there's Building 1. Okay, it's now that the forests around Building 1 have been replaced by several dozen research buildings. Okay, so I'm showing this campus right now because NIH conducts research in its own laboratories on this campus and a few others I'll talk about in a minute across the country. But most of the money that NIH spends is in support of health science research at other laboratories around the country and around the world. Okay, so the large majority of the funds is spent in universities and medical schools and so forth around the country. It spends a lot of resources and effort training scientists, spends a lot of attention on this, and also on effectively communicating discoveries and relevant medical information to Congress and the public. And this is not just the administrators in Bethesda communicating. There's a lot of effort teaching scientists how to communicate their work to the lay public. As a result of all of these efforts, there has been a tremendous amount of scientific accomplishment over the years as a result of NIH funding. 162 scientists around the country and the world have become Nobel laureates who have based on work that has been supported by the National Institute of Health. Now, if I had given this talk yesterday morning at 9 o'clock, that number would have been 160. But yesterday, we added 2 more for the Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine for 2020, which was given to 3 researchers examining hepatitis C vaccine, or who discovered the vaccine and developed the vaccine for hepatitis C, including Harvey Alter, who is a scientist that works on the NIH campus. He works here in the part of the clinical center. So there are a number of, I don't know exactly the number of Nobel laureates that have come from this campus specifically, but it's, I think on the order of a couple dozen. Okay. So this is the easy to read organizational chart of the NIH. And it just goes to, it just shows you, Dad alluded to the number of institutes. There are 27 different institutes and centers, and all of these are listed simply in alphabetical order. and connected through this tree all up to the office of the director. Okay. And I think as the public face of the NIH, you probably are familiar with Dr. Francis Collins, who came to prominence as the leader of the Human Genome Project and was the director of the National Human Genome Institute and then became NIH director. You're also probably familiar with the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, Tony Fauci. I personally work down here in the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke. And so you might notice that if you look around at these, many of these institutes can be affiliated with a particular clinical field. Cancer Institute Oncology, the Eye Institute Ophthalmology, and this is basically the Neurology Institute, and we're closely related to what I guess you would call the Psychiatry Institute, which is the National Institute of Mental Health. Now, those are a lot of institutes. They were all equal-sized boxes on that organization chart, but they don't receive equal portions of the NIH budget. Okay, the NIH budget in 2020 was almost $42 billion. And you can see here that it is spread out among all of the institutes, but somewhat unevenly. And you can see that the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases has nearly a $6 billion deficit, and so budget. But the largest institute budget-wise is the National Cancer Institute. So you don't usually hear about Dr. Sharpless, the NCI director, but he controls the significant resources that the nation devotes to the study and the cure of different kinds of cancers. Okay, and you can see NINDS over here. Actually, I guess it's about the fifth largest institute in terms of funding. This is my the institute that I like to think of it as my institute. And I just want to remind you that most of this money is not spent in Bethesda. Most of it, 80% or so, is distributed to laboratories across the country. 20% of it is spent at NIH. I'll talk about that in a minute, but I want to point out that the money, the 80%, is spent across the country, and you can see here on this map that it's not too surprising the kinds of states that have a lot of large medical institutions attract most of or larger fractions of the funding, but every state is benefiting from NIH funding in some way. And in case you're wondering, Virginia receives over $400 million. It's probably up starting to push $500 million a year in NIH funding. NIH funding is also distributed around the world. And you can see that the large majority of the countries in the world benefit in some way from support from the US National Institutes of Health. I don't know what Paraguay did to get on a bad list, but you can see that most everything here, except a few African countries and Iran and Turkmenistan or something, receives NIH funding. Now, a compelling argument can be made that $42 billion is being spent wisely, and you know, based on the history of NIH, you can make that argument based purely on the science and the medical progress that's been made. You know, NIH supported research has enabled cardiovascular disease death rates to fall dramatically in the last 60 years since NIH has been supporting work in that area. Cancer deaths continue to decline at a regular clip, and many therapies that have been developed, including, for example, this one for HIV, has extended the life expectancy of the United States population. You can also make just flat out economic arguments for this, simply because, you know, $40 billion is going to support a lot of jobs, of course. And NIH research supports over 400,000 jobs at 2,500 institutions. It consistently, year after year, generates about twice as much new economic activity as the NIH's budget. And that's not even counting, you know, the larger role that it plays as you know, sort of the foundation for the entire medical industry in this country, which employs a large number of citizens and generates billions of dollars in wages, salaries, goods, and services. And I love this, and you know that Francis Collins loves to show this. The Human Genome Project, which I should say and stress, started out as a purely basic science enterprise, and actually was performed without really knowing fully the application of the information, you know, why it was going to be, or whether it was going to be useful to know every single base pair in that long DNA ladder that makes up our human genome. But it's paid off. It's generated over $1 trillion in economic growth, which I'm told is a huge return on the investment. Okay, so I guess I hesitate to ask if anybody has any questions about this aspect. I've said to my dad numerous times, my dad has been a trusted financial advisor to me, because I tell him that I'm good with numbers unless they have dollar signs in front of them. You know, if anybody has any questions up to this point, I'm happy to answer them. And please don't hesitate to chime in. Okay.
Yep. Jeff, I have a question. How do you control who gets the benefit from the scientists, the schools, and so on? That I'm not being negative. I'm just curious. It's who gets the benefit of the money when they do some breakthrough, make a breakthrough, whatever it is. How does that work generally?
Yeah. So you're asking how the sausage is made. How do we determine who gets the money?
Yeah. Well, not the disbursement. But let's say you come up with some breakthrough in your neurology area. Do you benefit from that personally? Can you benefit from it personally? I'm not saying you shouldn't. How does that work?
That's a different question for somebody working at NIH versus somebody working in a university. As a federal employee, the U.S. government ethics limit dramatically my ability to profit financially from discoveries that I make. But you know, at universities, a lot of times you'll see scientists come up with a breakthrough and develop a patent, and the university and the scientist can benefit from the royalties on that patent. A lot of scientists choose to form companies to monetize certain discoveries, but the scientific process generally makes those the substance of those breakthroughs available to the entire community, so that further progress on those can be achieved by the larger scientific community.
Okay.
Is that?
Yep. Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, so how does the NIH decide who to give money to? Of all the researchers in the country, how does this work? Well, really, I mean, it all starts with the researcher herself. That researcher will have an idea for a series of experiments to address a particular scientific question, okay? And these questions are not presented to the scientist from on high, okay? This is as grassroots as it gets, okay? About 60% of NIH's funding goes to research that is initiated by individual investigators, okay? And I can tell you that as a scientist, one of the great things about being a scientist is also one of the most challenging things, and that is nobody tells me what to do. Nobody tells me what experiments to do, even at NIH, okay, and certainly not at a university somewhere around the country. The trick is for a good scientist to identify the important questions in their field and to devise ways of testing important hypotheses, okay? So when a researcher comes up with this idea, they'll submit a grant proposal to the NIH. And this proposal is reviewed by a panel of professional scientists from around the country. I have participated on these scientific review panels. They are exhausting. You sit in a room for 2 days, about 12 hours each day, and you review these applications, which are long and complicated and very dense. It's an exhausting process, but this panel simply ranks the quality of the proposals that is on their docket. And this whole enterprise employs over 20,000 reviewers from around the country. They provide an evaluation that goes back to the individual institutes to which the grant proposal was submitted. And the administrators, and these are people here in Bethesda, interpret the recommendations from the panel. And in some cases, the panel has not viewed the proposal favorably enough for it to receive a score that would enable it to be funded. And in that case, there's some feedback between the program officer and the researcher gets feedback from the panel and can then go back to the drawing board and improve their proposal for subsequent submission. Now, some of these proposals are recommended for funding, and in order for that to happen, they have to be approved by an advisory council, which is a smaller group of very established scientists from around the country that meet to approve the submissions for each institute. So NINDS has its own advisory council. And if they approve it, they send it to the institute director, who makes the final decision on the allocation of funds. And again, the institute director has the final say, but he is beholden to Congress and has to justify his decisions every year before Congress. And I should point out that less than 10% of the applications are approved. Okay, and so you can see that this is a tremendous amount of work for all of these people, and a researcher has to spend a lot of their time these days submitting proposals because the funding criteria are so strict. And then the funds are given back to the researcher, who then uses them to perform the experiments that they proposed. And in general, and this is just a ballpark, the typical grant is about $250,000 a year for that researcher. That's what we would call direct funds that go right into the researcher's budget. The university also gets an additional amount that's some fraction of this award, typically around 50% of the award, which are called indirect costs. And the university uses this. You can imagine a large university medical center has a lot of costs in keeping the lights on and everything, and that's what those indirect costs do. Okay. So that's how the spending is done for all of this 80% outside. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the 10% inside. This is 20% of the total budget, but about half of that is the Office of the Director and the administration of research funds. The other half of it, or 10% of the total budget, is spent on scientific research in the intramural research program. And the intramural research program has laboratories in 4 states around the country, in Montana, Arizona, North Carolina, and the large majority of the research is done in Maryland, and most of that is done in Bethesda on the campus that I showed you before. Okay. And I would say that there's a lot of attention paid at NIH about attracting scientific research to this campus that is uniquely suited to the capabilities of the very generous funding that the science here receives. And one of the real unique features of the intramural program is the clinical center. And that is this enormous building here, okay, which is the largest clinical research center in the world. It was already the single largest building, and then they put on a $1.2 billion addition. So it's big. It's a very sophisticated state-of-the-art hospital, but the patients are admitted only as part of clinical studies. Okay, if I fall off the curb walking out of my office, I will go across the street to Suburban Hospital. I will not go to the clinical center. You have to be part of a clinical study, and so in a lot of cases, patients across the country are referred to these clinical studies by their physician. People can also sign up on their own for clinical studies. And right now on campus, there are about 1,500 clinical trials, clinical studies in progress. Okay, and this recruits a wide diversity of clinicians, scientists, and patients from around the world. I work up here in this building up here, which is a relatively new building. And it is the Porter Neuroscience Research Center. And it's a very cool building. I don't want to give you the impression that these individual institutes are like silos that don't interact. This building is a neuroscience research building, but that's not just NINDS. There are 7 or 8 institutes that have people in this building that do neuroscience research. The National Institute of Aging, of Child Health and Human Development, which would be pediatrics, the Eye Institute. It's amazing, but all of them are interested in studying particular parts and aspects of brain function. Now, I would say that the majority of neuroscience research is occupied with understanding how the brain interprets information from the world around us and processes that information. Okay. Now, there are almost 100 billion nerve cells in the brain. Okay. It's a tremendously complex organ. And so people tend to focus on different parts of the brain. Okay. Some people try to focus on the whole thing, but generally people are focused on different components. A lot of people, for example, are focused on movement disorders, and that involves, in many cases, studying the cerebellum, which is back here. People studying memory are interested in studying the hippocampus, which is this structure up here, or the cerebral cortex, which is this wrinkled structure up here. The problem, not the problem, the real difficulty with this is what you would like to do is study how your individual part of the brain interacts with the outside world. What kind of information does it receive? And it's very hard to know exactly what kind of information the hippocampus receives, for example, because how do you show a memory to a hippocampus and know exactly how you're stimulating it? Okay, what you'd really like to do is to study part of the brain that you could stimulate very carefully and quantitatively and measure very immediately the response to that stimulation. And ideally, you would use a stimulation that was purely physiological, okay? And that's why I've been attracted to studying the retina, okay? The retina is officially part of the central nervous system, and it's the part that lines the back of the eye, okay? And of course, the retina absorbs light coming in through the pupil and the lens and transforms the light into a neural signal that it sends to the rest of the brain through the optic nerve, okay? And if you were to take a cross section of the retina here, the retina is a sheet that covers the back of the eye. If you were to take a cross section of the sheet, this is what you would see. Well, after a little fluorescence enhancement, I have to admit. But it's just a beautiful structure. So actually the light comes, this is the same orientation as it would be here. The light comes in through the bottom of the retina, passes through the entire circuit here, and is absorbed by these blue cells out here, which are the photoreceptors. Okay, these are your rods and your cones. Most people have heard of those. And then the photoreceptors turn the light energy into a neural signal and pass it to different types of nerve cells in this circuit. And the visual signal, the version of the visual world is transformed during this transmission through the circuit. And each of the connections, the so-called synapses, the synaptic connections between these different nerve cells transforms the visual signal. Now, my lab is specifically interested in how these synapses perform this transformation and why these transformations are important for vision, okay? And just to orient you a little bit, the photoreceptors talk to these green cells here, which are called bipolar cells. And the bipolar cells come down here and then contact these purple cells down here, which are the ganglion cells. And the ganglion cells send their output cables, okay, their axons, through the optic nerve to the rest of the brain, okay? And just to give you an idea, only 0.2% of the nerve cells in the brain are in the retina. Okay, there's only about 150 million nerve cells in each one of your retinas. So I guess that would be 0.4% because you have two eyes. But about 1 million ganglion cells pass all of the, yeah?
I got to interrupt you. Keep going, but begin to wrap up.
Yeah, okay, good. Oh, yeah, sorry. Okay, anyway.
I'm your father. I've been cutting you
Yeah,
off.
yeah, okay. See, I knew I was going to do this. I speak in 50-minute increments, okay? So anyway, that's
Hey,
what
Jeff, this is Bill.
Yeah.
Tell your dad to mind his own business.
It's not the first time he's told me to be quiet. Yeah.
No, this is good, Jeff. And what we'll do, Jeff, those of us who have to leave will just drop off. But you know, we really appreciate your time here.
That's an issue of self-control. I start talking about the retina and I don't stop. But I do want to take some time to talk about COVID, because I know that everybody, this is an area of big concern. And I think and what I wanted to do was talk very briefly about this picture that everybody sees. Has everybody seen this in the news or someplace? I thought that it would be useful just to talk about this. This is a picture of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. Okay, and what this is it's a bag of genetic material, and the gray part here is the bag that is made up of fatty molecules that protect genetic material, RNA, inside. And what happens is that this virus, when it comes into your body, it attaches to cells and enters the cells, and then hijacks the cell's genetic machinery to produce or to translate the genetic material that's inside the virus. Okay, and I just want to point out that you see these pictures of these different molecules on the surface of the virus, and they play very specific roles. But these spiky things here, which are called spike proteins or S proteins, are a key protein for enabling the virus to attach to a cell, break into it, and infect it. Okay, so a lot of our therapies are directed at these spike proteins. Okay, SARS, of course, stands for severe acute respiratory syndrome, which is why the primary symptoms of getting COVID are pulmonary in the lungs. And it's called a coronavirus based on what this class of viruses look like under the microscope. Okay, you can see this here. The spike proteins on the surface create this surround here that looks like the corona of the sun. Okay. Now, as you know, the response to this crisis has involved government leaders working in partnership with industry leaders and nonprofit organizations. And all of this is being coordinated by the foundations of the National Institutes of Health, which from an ethical standpoint facilitates the interaction between government and industry. Okay. And the goal of this partnership is basically implemented through different working groups that seek to understand the basic science that can help us understand how the virus works, and to develop therapeutics and mount effective clinical trials. And this is for therapies to help people who have the virus, as well as to develop vaccines to prevent others from getting the virus. Okay. Now, all of this in the news and things, you'll hear about clinical trials. And I thought that you might be interested to know what all of that gobbledygook means. You'll hear about different phases of clinical trials, okay? The first phase actually arises in the laboratory and is primarily testing a new drug to see its effects on human cells. This also involves giving very small doses to people, but not large enough doses that it would help them. This is very discovery oriented. Now, phase one is once you have a promising drug, you have to determine whether it's safe. Okay, so again, this is not to help the patient yet. This is to determine whether the drug will harm the patient. Okay, so you test for side effects in a very small number of people, and this occurs over several months. And if it's safe, you then inject safe levels of the drug into patients, several hundred patients in a phase 2 trial. And then in phase 3, you're comparing that drug to other available drugs on the market to determine whether it works better than other available drugs. And at this point, if it gets through this, it is eligible for FDA approval. And I should point out that less than 10% of the drugs in phase 1 are approved by the FDA. This is incredibly expensive. And so the research and development costs shouldered by the NIH and by pharmaceutical companies is very large. And then you'll hear sometimes about phase 4, which is a longer term trial that can last many years. Okay. So in these clinical trials that are going on right now in this active program involve a number of different approaches to use as therapies to treat patients that have COVID, but also to generate information about promising viruses and other promising treatments. And this just shows you that the vaccine candidates are progressing. There are several different kinds of vaccines. I can talk about that later that have that are progressing through phase 1 and 2, and then into phase 3 to see how they work relative to other therapies. Now, there's a lot of talk right now in the news about when a vaccine is going to happen, and I just want to underline the fact that this takes time. Bill is wearing an End Polio Now t-shirt. Polio vaccine, a successful polio vaccine, was first introduced 70 years ago in 1950. And polio is still not completely eradicated in the country. Successful vaccines take time to develop. It's not something to be entered into lightly. What a vaccine does is when you administer a vaccine, you introduce an agent into the body that is masquerading as the antigen itself. Okay, so something that the immune system mistakes for COVID, and you allow the immune system to attack that and to mount a defense that it can then use to attack the actual antigen should you encounter it. Okay, but activating your immune system, as you know, is not to be taken lightly. It can be dangerous. Vaccines, there are cases where vaccines are more harmful than they are helpful. This is particularly the case in a situation like COVID, where a lot of the people who have COVID are asymptomatic. And so a vaccine could possibly cause more harm than good. Okay, so it's not, unfortunately, not a fast process, but it's certainly heading in a promising direction. So I'll stop there. I'll apologize to everyone, particularly my father, for talking too long, and I'd be happy to take any questions if you have them.
Jeff, you touched on something right at the end there that is my biggest beef. I believe in freedom of speech, but we get politicians and the mainstream media putting out all kinds of wrong or incomplete information. Do you consider the NIH the go-to site to get true information on the progress of a cure or a vaccine for COVID right now? Or do you say the CDC is a good site to go to? What do you recommend to go see the actual truth and the progress we're making towards coming up with something to fight this?
So I would first answer that by saying that my true belief is that science is not a political process.
Amen.
And that I'm not saying that scientists don't have political views, but I think good scientists dissociate their work from the political implications. And I think that you might notice that that Dr. Fauci has run into a little problems for that, because I admire Dr. Fauci a lot and see him as somebody who is interested in communicating to the best of his ability what he knows to be the truth at a particular point in time. So I do trust the information that's coming from NIH. I think that it's very tricky these days. I also trust the sources of the information coming from the people at the CDC. The CDC has a lot of excellent science being applied to this, and there is a point at which scientific information is being used by different people for different political ends, but I don't think that that's happening on behalf of the scientists themselves. Does that answer your question? I'm trying to answer that carefully.
Yeah, and one more quick follow-up. If you take 10 scientists and you put them in a room together with their ideas on how to fight this, they're probably going to be 10 different opinions. How do you come to a consensus of what the public needs to know when you got a bunch of scientists that can't agree on things?
Yeah. So that's a great question. And that points out the difficulty with trying to do this on an accelerated timescale. Because the way scientists do this is they'll have different ideas about how things work. And they need time to devise experiments to test their ideas. And I should point out that the scientific method dictates that you have a theory and you devise an experiment, not to prove the theory, but to disprove the theory. You can only disprove a theory. And the longer that theory withstands attempts to disprove it, the stronger it is. Okay, but that takes time. Yeah. And the rush to get information about this virus has led to, scientific journals have tried to fast track publications about the virus. And so there's been a lot of work done and a lot of publications, but a smaller fraction of that work is correct than normal because it's been rushed out there. Okay, so there's a balance here. We need information, we need progress, we need a vaccine as quickly as possible, but we need to get it right. I mean, and it's not just for style points. I mean, incorrectly developed vaccines can be dangerous, and it's important to know. But to answer your question, those disagreements are hashed out in meetings and in the literature, and a good scientist takes all of the facts available and develops their theories and their ideas about how to test things. There aren't alternative facts in science. Okay, there are facts, and you take all of the facts.
Thanks, Jeff.
I'm starting to preach. I'm sorry. Amen.
Bill's muted. Oh, Bill's muted.
Any other?
Are there any other questions? Well, Jeff, I think normally we have a bunch of questions, but your presentation has been very sobering. I can't remember a better use of my time in a very long. This is the best hour I've ever spent. And I think I speak for our club when we say that. We do appreciate your coming to visit us. And down the trail, when a lot is behind us, we're going to ask you to come back again, because I will remember this hour for the rest of my life. And Randy, you get a lot of credit. You must be one proud daddy. I know we're all proud mommies and daddies, and you probably can't stand yourself right now, and I can understand that.
It
So
just proves that genetics skip generations.
So with that, I would ask, is Diane still there? I think Diane went and took a lunch break.
No, I was on mute.
Okay, Diane, then we're wrapping up, and you know what we do.
Well,
wait
you
a
have
second.
to let the close the screen share.
Yeah, for,
Hang on.
so you know how to do that, Jeff, don't you? Okay.
We got it.
So now you can go ahead.
There you go.
All right. So with regard to what we think, say, and do, 1, is it the truth? 2, is it fair to all concerned? 3, will it build good people and better friendships? 4, will it be beneficial to all concerned? And Stanley.
Will we make it fun?
And on the 21st, Stanley's having a big meeting. He'll get an email out on that. Take care, everyone.
Membership party, don't forget me.
Thank you,
Okay.
Jeff.
We'll see you soon.